How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Cause Before Symptom. It is your lovely guest host, Urban. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We did, as a matter of fact, have technical difficulties. I'm filling in for James tonight. He will be back tomorrow night for a Wednesday show. I'm glad that y'all could join me today. Let me see if I can make myself a little bit bigger. Um, Still getting used to this um, idea of, um, you know, streaming. So. See. Does that work? Oop, there I am. Howdy, y'all. Okay. I think that's good. So how are you guys doing tonight? Boots, Claire, how's it going? Kimmy, how are you doing? Let's see. Who else do we got here? Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so guys, I don't know if you had a chance to see it. As a matter of fact, I did an interview today with a guy named Harrison Cayley. He was the Yeah, my bad. James has to be filling in every now and again whenever he's away on vacation or something like that. So if you haven't met me yet, I'm Josh. I'm Urban. I just fill in for James and help him in the background. So tonight we're just going to be kind of chilling, have a good time. And first, I'm going to show you some like a highlight reel from the interview I did. He runs again a Substack called Political Ponerology. Ponerology is the study of evil. So you can find him at ponerology.substack.com. Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that, Kimmy. So, guys, let's just go ahead and play us in with the intro, and then we'll watch the clip. So, grab some popcorn, grab a drink, and.
Ponerology is the study of evil, from the Greek word poneros, one of the Greek words for evil, and it was called that because the author Andrew Lobaczewski, he was a Polish psychologist. So he was grew up. I think he was born in like 1921 thereabouts. Can't remember off the top of my head. So he grew up in the 20s and 30s, and so lived through the Nazi occupation and then the imposition of communism circa 1950. And so, as a psychologist, he and others were interested in the psychological nature of what they are experiencing. Referred to by various names, so communism, totalitarianism, and eventually he came up with, with the help of some Benedictine monks, he came up with the word ponerology as a kind of an overall word to describe what he considers like a new interdisciplinary branch of science, and that would be like the scientific study of evil. And so he called his book Political Ponerology because the book was specifically focused on the application and the manifestation of evil in a political situation, political climate. So ponerology more broadly would be, he would probably define it as like the psychological and biological study of like the psychological and biological underpinnings of what we consider evil in human behavior.
So, just can I ask, what year did he write the book again?
Well, that's something of a story because he wrote it several times. He was working on it in the. I can't remember when he first started working on a first draft, but he was working on it for sure in the 60s and 70s.
Wow.
And then he left Poland in the late 70s and without a copy because he would either he had to destroy one manuscript and then lost possession of another one. And so he rewrote the book like from scratch when he was starting from when he was living in New York in the early 80s. So he wrote the current, like the edition that we now have, which is published. He wrote in the early 80s and kind of self-published it in 1984, 85. That means he basically just had a few copies like typed up and printed, and I believe he left one, or he left a few at university libraries at the time in New York. But it was only ever published, in an actual edition that you could buy in 2005, 2006. So that's when the company that I work for, Red Pill Press, published, the first edition of the book. And since then, it's been in print ever since. And we put out a second edition, second revised edition, where we checked over the translation, added a bunch of footnotes, a bunch of extra. That's something I've been thinking about for years. I made a post about it a year or two ago, and this I kind of just referred back to it and gave an example. So the ternary form it's a musical form. So it's a musical term where in a musical piece you'll have a theme or a statement or a motif or a section of music, and it's typically called the A section. And then a B section will sound completely different. New melody, maybe the same key, maybe not. And then after that second section, which contrasts with the first section again will repeat. So it'll be an A-B-A form. And oftentimes that repetition of the A will be slightly modified. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it'll be modified, but the modifications the way I put it is that when the theme restates at the end, it has taken on new meaning because of the contrasting B section. So you get A and then B and then A, which is imbued with a new meaning because of the existence of A. After having heard it, or B, after having heard the second section, after the first section, you get a new understanding of the first section.
Like a narrative.
So, yeah. And so I've related that to, I've always, ever since I was a teenager, I would see things about human nature or about the progression of a person's life or something like that in that form. So I gave a couple of examples in the article that I linked to in the ternary form article. One is just a reference to a famous T.S. Eliot quotation where he talks about coming home and what's I can't even remember the quote, but
now can you see me? My apologies. Tonight's just been a bit of bad luck. Let's see. Can you hear me okay now? I hope so. I don't know why I'm having so many bugs tonight. Oop. Can you hear me? Might have to...
You come home with a new sense.
Huh. Can you guys hear me at all? Okay, cool. Hopefully it works this time.
Of the
Did you guys hear any of it, or should I start it from the beginning? I'll start it from the beginning.
And so, as a psychologist, he and
My
others
apologies.
were interested in the psychological nature of what they are experiencing, referred to by various names. So, communism, totalitarianism, and eventually he came up with, with the help of some Benedictine monks, he came up with the word ponerology as a kind of an overall word to describe what he considers like a new interdisciplinary branch of science, and that would be like the scientific study of evil. And so he called his book Political Ponerology because the book was specifically focused on the application and the manifestation of evil in a political situation, in a political climate. So ponerology more broadly would be,
Gotta love it
he
when
would
there's
probably define it as like
something that has to
the
go wrong.
psychological and biological study of like the psychological and biological underpinnings of what we consider evil in human behavior.
So, just could I ask, what year did he write the book again?
Well, that's something of a story because he wrote it several times.
Oh,
He was working on it in the I can't remember when he first started working on a first draft, but he was working on it for sure in the 60s and 70s.
wow.
And then he left Poland in the late 70s and without a copy because he would either had well he had to destroy one manuscript and then lost possession of another one, and so he rewrote the book like from scratch when he was living in New York in the early 80s. So he wrote the current, like the edition that we now have, which is published, he wrote in the early 80s and kind of self-published it in 1984, 85. That means he basically just had a few copies like typed up and printed, and I believe he left one he left a few at university libraries at the time in New York, but it was only ever published in an actual edition that you could buy in 2005, 2006.
Okay.
So that's when the company that I work for, Red Pill Press, published the first edition of the book, and since then it's been in print ever since, and we put out a second edition, second revised edition, where we checked over the translation, added a bunch of footnotes, a bunch of extra. That's something I've been thinking about for years. I made a post about it a year or two ago, and this I kind of just referred back to it and gave an example. So the ternary form is it's a musical form. So it's a musical term where you in a musical piece you'll have a theme or a statement or a motif or a section of music, and it's typically called the A section.
Mm-hmm.
And then a B section will sound completely different. New melody, maybe the same key, maybe not. And then after that second section, which contrasts with the first section again will repeat. So it'll be an A-B-A form. And oftentimes that repetition of the A will be slightly modified. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it'll be modified, but the modifications the way I put it is that when the theme restates at the end, it has taken on new meaning because of the contrasting B section. So you'll get A and then B and then A, which is what would the word be? Imbued with a new meaning because of the existence of A. After having heard B, after having heard the second section, after the first section, you get a new understanding of the first section.
Like a narrative.
So, yeah. Okay. And so I related that to, I've always, ever since I was a teenager, I would see things about human nature or about the progression of a person's life or something like that in that form. So I gave a couple examples in the article that I linked to in the ternary form article. One is just a reference to a famous T.S. Eliot quotation where he talks about coming home what's I can't even remember the quote, but you come home with a new sense of the meaning of what home is when you come back home again after a certain adventure or something like that.
Absolutely.
And so the example that I gave in this article was the conception of supernatural evil. Mm-hmm. And instead of seeing the ABA form kind of play out in a person's life or a certain feature of their personality or their belief system, I looked at it just briefly. It's just really a small thought exercise over the course of centuries, where our initial conception of evil was purely supernatural. Mm-hmm. Where we saw everything that we would consider today to be like mental illness as a product of, let's say, demonic possession. And so
I mentioned in this interview that,
there was very little understanding of what we consider today to be mental.
Whereas the belief in demons and evil spirits has decreased over maybe the last 100 years. The belief in ghosts and supernatural has actually increased, which is a bit of a head scratcher, to say the least.
Illness, let's say psychosis or schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And then along came the kind of psychiatric movement in psychology, and nowadays we see these as purely biological, psychological, sociological phenomena, and there's no supernatural element whatsoever. And I regard that largely as a result of just our scientific materialist worldview that that the mainstream kind of operates under, that all of academia operates under, a set of strict kind of metaphysical presupposition nature of reality that excludes anything supernatural, by whatever definition of supernatural there might be.
Mhm.
And so what I see, or what I kind of predict and want to see happen, is that A prime, that new restatement of the initial theme of supernatural evil, where I actually think it makes sense and it's rational, and there are good reasons to
I do too.
to believe in supernatural evil, but maybe not exactly as we saw it in the past, but so to the way I see it is take the best of both worlds. And I quote, there was a scholar, I think a biblical scholar, I believe, or a religious scholar.
Was it
That
Klepper?
yeah, Klepper.
Okay.
And she was talking about this this guy. What was his name? Father Albert or something.
I can go ahead and just read this short little quoted sentence.
And so to kind of weave this back to the discussion of like demonic possession, I actually think that that psychopathy and demonic possession are two separate things.
Okay.
Psychopaths are more like if demons exist, if demons actually were alive in human form. Like that's kind of how I see a psychopath.
That's a fair way to look at it.
They're
Yeah,
not
same as
possessed
you
by
would
something
agree.
else. They're just, they're more like just flesh and blood demons that are in human form.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking, another reason I kind of wanted to show you these clips because I haven't really had a chance to watch it myself yet. But I'm sitting here kind of thinking, in much of a way, these things, when you read them in the Bible, or when they're in the Bible as logos, or the Word, the one and only Word, you're really watching these things cross over from the spiritual dimension into the physical dimension. And so a demon, in this case, these things cross into the spiritual dimension when you have demonic psychopathic people, as he's saying. And I think that's true, because it took me having to interact with a handful of people that acted that way, that I actually learned, at least in my opinion, what a quote-unquote demon was. So
Possession, usually, from my reading about it, and the cases that I've read, it's more the case of a, like you were describing in the quotes that you read. It's a more or less normal person who has feelings, who has like a normal range, but who emotional range, but who is oppressed and tortured. So demonic possession is more like the result of it's more like the children that are the victims of these
absolutely
of these things, is that it destroys them to the
Yes.
point where maybe then they can be possessed. And so I see those as kind of two of the main branches of evil. It's like psychopaths, I don't see them as possessed. I see them more as just kind of, almost like the pawns, or the earthly soldiers of a higher demonic force, than actually being possessed themselves.
Absolutely. And so again, this that I'm about to say is what a lot of I guess you could say practicing Luciferian Satanists, people who do this to children, what they believe, and this is pretty messed up, but they truthfully do believe that the method by which a demon is inserted is through ritual sodomy of a child. That's what they believe. They believe that it is a way to insert a demon. And this being done to somebody at a very young age, that's their whole idea, is that this has to be done before a certain age. And what it does is they believe it gives them this demon. And exactly what you said. The people who have been on the receiving end of it, the survivors of it, are for the most part some of the strongest people I've ever seen, just because if they are able to overcome that and become a functioning person again, that requires just a lot of work. And I've yet to really see anybody who's done it without faith in some sort. Mainly,
Mhm.
they end up in Christianity, but it's very rare that people do it without some sort of faith system. So I am truthfully inclined to believe that it is a demon that they're inserting in a higher level sense of just what happens when you do that to a child. I mean, that is a demon. That emotional baggage is demonic possession, and I think that's the true nature of it in similar senses.
Yeah, it's like the fracturing of the child's psyche.
Yep.
I'm gonna speak kind of metaphorically, but when you break a person's psyche,
Mhm.
it creates openings,
Yes.
and so the
And this is exactly the stuff that it literally, and it was interesting because part of this discussion, and I encourage you guys to watch the whole thing. It's on my channel or my Substack. You can watch it. Um, we were talking about Pastor Carner's book, the way that he has discovered this breath mechanism. And so a lot of the way that he had discovered that evil manifests, ponerology, the study of evil, fit perfectly on top of what Pastor Carner had discovered. It was a perfect match.
the tortures and the traumas create these psychological openings that can then be exploited
Hmm.
by um, you know
Yeah,
otherworldly beings.
absolutely.
They kind of see they see an opening, they see a weakness, and they take it.
Hmm.
Because like mental health, the way I kind of conceive of mental health is like a well built castle. It's like it's orderly. Things are going on as they should. There's a gate, um, a front gate where certain things are let in, certain things are kept out, but everything is controlled. If you have a structure that's in shambles, well then enemies and thieves can just sneak in and take whatever they want or take up residence. And I think that's more or less accurate metaphor or image of what the psyche actually is. And
Boundaries.
so yeah, yeah, and especially a child. So a child hasn't learned any of those techniques. They haven't had the opportunity to develop those strategies and those techniques and that mental strength. And
Hmm.
so that's why it's the biggest sin, I think,
Yeah,
is abusing a child like that, is because it's an exploitation of that natural weakness. Like,
absolutely.
so that their family by extension should be providing that protection,
Hmm.
but for whatever reason, whether the family's involved or just absent, it's it's exploiting the natural weakness of a child to create that psychological opening that is then exploited by other types of and so you mentioned one example, and there are several in ufology,
It's funny. I
like
replaced myself
to get
perfectly.
to kind of bring this back to how we started the discussion. In ufology, there are what a couple researchers in the 90s called the two unspeakables of ufology. So
Hmm.
these were two of the issues that came up repeatedly in research, but that most even ufologists were uncomfortable acknowledging, talking about publicly. Um, they just, it was like you just don't talk about it. And
Yeah.
so there were two things: missing children and human mutilations.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we've
I
heard. So no, go ahead.
No. I mean, I was just okay. That really, once you said that, because I didn't know what you were going to say.
Hmm.
Uh, that does, yeah, that gets into interesting territory. I have heard that it is possible that a deal was reached, that
Hmm.
these
Pastor
entities
Carter's
were
talked about this
supposedly,
before.
with the military, we will leave you alone if you allow us to experiment without killing
Very
so
possible.
so many
I mean,
people. But then
I think it's
they started,
entirely
like you said, they
possible.
started seeing child abductions and human mutilation, and so maybe these things were just not sticking to the deal. And if they kind of got you by the balls, what can you do about Um, I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
I think it, I know this is, bear with me here, but the show Stranger Things is this premise that they have opened a doorway that they don't know how to close, and I think that may be what we're looking at here. I think that potentially they have messed around so much that now they have opened a can of worms they don't know how to close. And it is,
Yep.
in my opinion, possible that that goes back to when we began detonating atomic bombs because we had actually created new isotopes
Absolutely.
of elements or like these new isotopes that had not existed in the world until we detonated those bombs. And so, if these things did not exist, where did they come from? The doorway is between non-existence and existence, and that's scary. But that's just a theory. But yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's similar. Nigel Kerner, he passed away a few years ago. He had some similar theories regarding UFOs and aliens, and well, also David Lynch and Mark Frost, who wrote Twin Peaks. Um, they have they that was the picture that Frost painted in his kind of uh, non-TV work on Twin Peaks. That the well, and it's depicted to a certain extent in the third Twin Peaks season, where the nuclear detonation at Trinity kind of opens a portal, and through which certain forms of evil come.
Alrighty, so I did just kind of want to show you guys that, just give you a little taste of that. I've actually got two more interviews this week. I'm going to be sitting down with Enoch, who we did, Pastor Carner and I did an interview with, I don't know, probably about a month ago now, the rundown of our reality. And then on Friday, I'm actually going to sit down with Josh Abraham, who is Fritz Springmeier's apprentice. He works with Fritz Springmeier a little bit. He's received a lot of help from him and his research, and they're friends. So I'm going to have him on and chat with him, and I think that will be very interesting conversation. So that will be Friday. We're doing the one with Enoch on Thursday on my channel. So what we're gonna do is I just thought I would kind of go through some of these books that I had found today. This one is psychoanalysts, psychologists, and let's see. Hold up. Let me bring it up. Psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists discuss psychopathy, dissociation, counter dissociation, and the like. So let's see if I can bring it up here. There we go. Transition. All right. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, so this book right here is actually a very interesting book because it was written by a lot of, like I said, psychologists, psychoanalysts, and psychiatrists, but they're discussing really what's we've started to call ponerology, which is the study of evil. The study of evil is more relevant now than it's really ever been. At least that is my opinion, because today we're ruled by evil people. So I guess I'll coin the term ponocracy, a government by the evil. I've gone to chapter 10 because it seemed interesting. So dissociation and counter dissociation, because I have heard that term just a couple of times. So I'll just read a little bit from it and we'll get to discussing it. So it starts off, it says dissociative reactions to trauma are common. In this article, I argue what I call counter-dissociative reactions to counter-trauma. He says they're also common. Analysts might react to patients' dissociative states by entering counter-dissociative states of their own. These counter-dissociative states may help or hinder the movement of the treatment. They may hinder by disallowing the therapist's otherwise clear view of what is occurring or did occur. Yet they may also allow the treatment bond to be maintained by enabling the therapist to avoid being overwhelmed, whether by the horror of the patient's reports of monstrous, unthinkable evil done to them or by patients' own reenactive fantasies or behaviors. Traumatic and non-traumatic dissociation. It says, the literature is, of course, replete with definitions, examples, and discussions of dissociation. As Howell and Itzkowitz in 2016 note, the concept of dissociation has roots in spirit possession, hypnosis, hysteria, and splitting, which is a bit interesting because if you remember, we were primarily concerned with the well, where is the line between the spiritual and the physical and the mental? And it is a really fine line because if you go back in time, you're going to really hear people using those words to talk about things that we would use psychiatric terms to describe today. So let's see. The paper that I was referencing is considered in one form or another an early work by Charcot in 1887, Brouwer and Freud 1893, Genet 1907, and all of these different authors. Dissociation involves an unconscious severing of connections between one set of mental contents and another. These sets include affects. So there's a difference between effect and affect. Might as well get those because it's a good question. It's a good thing to look things up if you don't know them. So the difference between affect and effect. I don't like that. Here we go. An affect is a verb to change something or someone. How does smoking affect your lungs? The flood affected the crops. The loud music affected her ability to concentrate. Effect. An effect is a noun. So the effects. So affect is to do, and effect is the thing itself. So, yeah, and as a matter of fact, I did learn that difference in none other than AP Psychology. So, let's see. These sets include effects and knowledge of facts, sensation, and or interpersonal patterns. The severing occurs before these effects or knowledge enter awareness. In dissociated states, good and bad feelings about the same object can coexist without conflict, or there are no connections between them that would alert the individual to the incongruities involved. And I think that's what he was talking about when he started to get into what he called the ABA theory. It's that one of these things on their own, I mean, that is it in and of itself, but then when you combine these and they form kind of a rhythm or a story, they take on additional meaning. And that's what he's talking about here. The biases and the knowledge that's already there can very much affect the way that these manifest in the individual. It says, broadly speaking, there are three kinds of dissociation. Everyday dissociation is the very first one. I got it. Maybe it won't let me do it. Okay. Does PDF have a thing to do it? Absolutely. No, I don't want to do that. Add text. Erase. Yeah, text only highlight. There we go. There we go. Everyday dissociation, the first type, is nearly a universal phenomenon. It would be hard to manage all of life's tasks without using some dissociation. That's true. Almost everyone has done it before. So when they're looking for candidates who are easily able to be programmed, what they will do is they will conduct tests to find individuals that have a high ability or high propensity to dissociate. And so one of the tests I heard described was, they would show a child like a severed human hand in a box. And some children would scream, obviously, but then some would just kind of go blank and just dissociate. And so the children who would dissociate easily, they were prime candidates for monarch programming. We may, for example, drive past 10 exits on a highway while working on some personal problem, then look up wondering how we got there, having dissociated the previous 20 minutes while we drove safely, but without conscious thought about what we were automatically doing. The second type, adaptive dissociation. In the moment of trauma, can be life
life-saving response. It is very much is. Uh, if you didn't dissociate in certain cases, in very traumatic events, the mind. This is a good question. I mean, if we didn't dissociate, I don't know how bad the damage would be to the mind. Thus, we've gotten that protection. The ability to dissociate one's, an example of an individual in a burning building may be so flooded with horror that he cannot think clearly enough to escape. The ability to dissociate panic allows him to make a plan of action and follow through on it. Only when safely out of the building does his full terror enter consciousness. So, uh, one way to kind of view this is men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And so men act first, and then they will slightly dissociate and think of the effects and emotions after. Whereas women, it's flipped. Women will process things in depth first and feel the emotions, and then they will act based on it. And it's just, a perfect inverse. I mean, you have two wholes that are designed to work together, and it's one of the greatest lies of modernity that that's not true. And as long as we take that as literal truth, then men and women will continue to deteriorate and not be able to function together. And that's really what we're seeing now. It's like you're seeing a lot of valid issues that are on both sides. I mean, men have a lot of valid issues. Women have a lot of valid issues right now. And part of it is that we are not brought up in a way where we learn to have each other's back. I mean, that's why you have two parts to the whole, is that you support and you're there for each other. And without that, it definitely makes life much harder. I would believe so. Let's see. In a similar fashion, a child being held down and sexually abused may instantly dissociate the experience, floating out of his body up to the ceiling where he watches another child being abused. Later, this child may re-enter his body and only then feel shame, anger, humiliation, or pain. That right there is when they talk about the concept of inserted demons. Oh, what happened? What the hell? Geez, tonight has been a... What the hell? Is the screen blank for everybody? Let's see. I have no idea. Hmm. Can everybody see the stream okay, or is that just on my end? I'm having a lot of technical difficulties tonight. I have no idea why that would be. Genuinely no idea whatsoever. Hmm. Huh. That's wild. I don't know what the hell is going on tonight. I have got so many bugs. Usually it's not like this. Okay, so if you guys can still see everything, I guess we're good. Yeah, so let's see. Dissociation develops into a habitual way of dealing with anxiety, becoming the maladaptive or pathological dissociation described throughout the clinical literature. Thus, for the individual sexually betrayed by a trusted parent, caretaker, or institution, adaptive dissociation may help in getting through the immediacy of the traumatic moment.
But when the trauma is repetitive, severe, or in concurrent with other significant trauma, dissociative can be maladaptive, developing into an individual's go-to defense against their feelings of anxiety. Perceptions of the world then become warped because dissociation leaves a person with only a partial understanding of what is happening around him. In turn, this may lead to a black and white uh, thinking, making subtlety and nuance an impossibility. And this faction, submission and domination, pain and pleasure, good and evil, are all seen as absolutes with little discernment of the many possible graduations between them or any possible flexibility in perception. That's a good catch. As a matter of fact, Mercury retrograde affecting communication technology. Very true. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so the reason I kind of went to this section is because I was interested to see how accurate it talks about the issue of it being used in abuse, and basically everything I'm reading here is showing me that the scientific conclusions that psychiatric professionals are coming to are exactly what are being described by the people who are victims of you know basically mental slavery. Dissociation is, I would say, on the rise now. I think much more people are dissociating, and I think that's kind of, uh, again, this is going down the rabbit hole, but it would seem that the chaos that we're seeing in society is just causing people to be so far out of it, and some more than others. But truthfully, a lot of people are just completely snapped out of reality. And it's just like, no, I don't care about what's right in front of me. I got to numb that with football or baseball or drinking or uh, drugs or sex or what, it's just everybody is snapped out of it. And I mean, that includes me too. I mean, definitely. A lot of the times that I will be researching things or writing or stuff like that, I will lose track of time, and that's how you know that really what you're dealing with is a bit of dissociation. The number one thing is that you're missing time, and so you'll sit there and you'll start doing something, and then all of a sudden you look back up and it's been 6 hours. Yeah, that is absolutely a bit of dissociation, uh, and it's not as uncommon as people might have you believe it is nowadays. Let's see. So, okay, so now he gets into counter trauma and counter dissociation. He says elsewhere, I have, and he cites a source, describe the ways severely traumatized and shattered patients may communicate their traumatized states, dissociated or not, to their analysts. Although this phenomena is often called vicarious traumatization, I believe counter-trauma better captures how these feelings emerging from the two-person co-constructed analytic dyad represent the full spectrum of contrapuntal internal reactions flowing between patient and analyst. So, let's see. Vicarious traumatization. I'll have to look that up. Counter-trauma. I have thus defined counter-trauma as the traumatic reactions an analyst or therapist has over time to hearing from patients about deeply traumatic experiences. This may induce in the analyst a traumatic response based partly on the material itself and partly on the patient's reactions to it, especially if the patient is dissociating his reactions. In the context of their co-constructed relationship and shared experience, this may invoke in the analyst contrapuntal counter-traumatic feelings based on both the analyst's own personal history and the history of listening to trauma. Likewise, I now define counter-dissociation as the dissociation a therapist may manifest when faced with the flow of severely dissociative and or traumatic material. As with counter-trauma, counter-dissociation emerges from the two-person
co-constructed dyad of the therapist and patient, the conversation back and forth, with the emotional flow back and forth between them, producing the counter-dissociative reaction. Well, that's interesting, and it gets into a bit of an interesting domain, because you might also consider that of people who interact or research into heavily dissociative people. And so, yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent it does, we would call it black pilled. I'm sure you guys have heard black pilled before. So I guess counter dissociation, or counter trauma, would be this idea of quote unquote being black pilled. You know, you've heard just how screwed up things are, and now you really just don't care anymore. So he gets into this case study. Terry is, I guess, one of his patients, dissociating, counter dissociating, malevolent introjects. In the same paper, he's described in detail Terry's abuse and its effects on our treatment relationship. He is a professional man in his early 50s. When we first met, he spoke in flat tones when he talked about his sexually, verbally, and physically, emotionally abusive father. He said, quote, "I've always hated him. It started before I have memory, before I was 2. Always in the bathroom, usually in the shower. It excited him so much to see my skin. He would suck on it, lick on it, and moan over what he tasted and smelled. He loved it if I cut myself, and he would suck the wound before bandaging it. Definitely a run-of-the-mill, parent of the year creep. Sometimes he would take peanut butter into the shower. I bet he did." Okay, so I'm not going to read that, just for the sake of our streams. But uh, the patient gulped. He said, "I was ashamed to say that each time." Fair enough. I mean, the way that when I was reading it, it's one of those things that you can kind of feel it in your gut. You don't really want to think of that. You don't want to read it. So fair enough. I get what he's saying. And he started to want it. He started to want this feeling. Yeah, so he would love bomb, and he would forget, so the patient would forget where it would lead. They would dissociate the trauma, or I would think maybe this time it would be different, that he would just love me, but it never stayed like that. Let's see, Claire says that she feels like people who have suffered narcissistic trauma abuse have emotional dissociation. Absolutely. Absolutely, because the truth is, anytime I try to explain this to somebody, and one of the things I'm trying to do and get better at, and my ultimate goal here would be to, and I guess kind of reading this book is working towards that and sharing this with you, but I would like to break down these topics, because when we're using terms like MK Ultra and government brainwashing, yes, that is a subsection of it, but no, they discovered this fundamental mechanism of dissociation, trauma-based dissociation, in humans, mainly in Joseph Mengelo's work. But an abusive relationship is basically the closest example I could give somebody as to how to understand this type of abuse. So the doctor, he says, listening to Terry, at first my skin crawled as I pictured the father malevolent enough to treat his young son so dreadfully. Was it right to question Terry's view of his father when I shared it? If so, how could I ever help Terry let go of hating someone so seemingly evil, to allow a more nuanced vision of what surely had been a very troubled man? But as time went on, more and more details emerged. I began to uncomfortably share at least some of his perceptions of his father as cold-blooded and immoral. Thoughts about his humanity crossed my mind less and less, which is interesting. I had never heard of this phenomenon, as a matter of fact. So Terry, the patient, says, quote, "I learned to always be dressed around him. The sight of my skin aroused him too much. Otherwise, I would remember him touching me when beating me. It always boiled down to my not being the son he wanted.
He really beat me for that, no matter what the specific provocation. And what Harrison and I were talking about earlier is like, what is it? What force of nature, truly, can anybody tell me, takes over a parent, one, and allows them to do this? I get other people may have different opinions because I'm not claiming to know this is the one and only, but I just can't reconcile that force being uh, the same polarity or um, the same as good people. Good people who go through their life and they don't ever do that. So what is it that takes over or affects somebody to do that? He said Terry's voice grew gravelly as he spat out his words. He said, I learned to never cry when he beat me. It would have pleased him too much. Revisiting these early sessions many years later, Terry underscored how totally dissociated and removed he had been when first started talking to me about his father. He said, I didn't want anyone in the room when I talked about my father. I was there alone, and for those moments, you did not exist. It was the only way I could talk about him. I was so unwell. That's dissociation. Yeah, Claire, 100% demons. Demons, yep. I mean, and at the very least, it's like, can I prove it's demons? No, but what I can tell you is that if this patient was living 300, 400, 500 years ago, hell, even 100, 200 years ago, they would have definitely saw this as demons. Absolutely. And again, if you've ever been around somebody who's got like a schizophrenic disorder, there is this idea that they can talk in monotone. It's kind of, I don't know, just very void, I guess you could say. I was trying to think of the best way to put it into words, but yeah, void. Because Terry nearly always spoke in lifeless, detached tones about any emotionally laden material, I had not realized that he had dissociated my very existence when speaking of his father. In retrospect, however, I realized I felt drained by having to work continually to stay in contact with him. I never totally lost my perception of Terry's father as a presumably traumatized, deeply dissociated man. I considered whether he had been in a dissociative state while murmuring about the taste of Terry's skin or beating Terry for being who he was. Yet, with each new detail, my concurrent sense of Terry's father as evil gained credibility and dominance in my mind. Yeah, I mean, the more you see this evil, what I just said, it's like I can't quite rationalize this being just normal. I mean, there's something that takes a hold of these people, and truthfully, a lot of these people, and again, and definitely not in defense of any of them, but to an extent, I guarantee you, a number of these people who perpetrate the evil are uh, severely abused as children themselves, and they are dissociating most of their perpetration of that abuse. For instance, I've heard from a number of survivors who were around, very powerful people, high-ranking people, and like crime syndicates and stuff like that. And what they said was that the people who were calling the shots were in fact just as abused or traumatized as they were. Ooh, let me turn up my mic. That probably sounds better. Can you guys hear me better now? I let's see. I guess I have my mic turned down too low. Let's see. Oh, okay. I think that's good. Okay. Yeah, so let's see. He goes on, he continues, he says, Terry sighed. I thought all boys did these things with their fathers. I didn't know what to call it. I just knew how unhappy I was. Then I tried to kill myself when I was 11. That's when it stopped. For once, my mother, who spent most of her time in bed staring at the ceiling, got herself dressed and dragged me and my father to a child guidance clinic. Claire says it almost seems like it's generational demons. Absolutely. I mean, that that is
in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, when the Bible talks about familiar spirits. One second, let me grab a drink. It's one thing you find out very quickly when you're doing a presentation or an interview or talking to somebody. Your mouth gets so dry so fast. But okay, yes, when the Bible talks about familial spirits, so first thing I think of, is it familiar as in I know you, or is it familial as in family? But if you think about it a little bit more, what you kind of discover is that it is a little bit of the same thing. So a familial spirit in your family, a generational spirit. Familiar, it's familiar. It is something that a lot of your ancestors have dealt with, and thus it's familiar to you and your generational line. Okay, and so we talk more and look more into it. The monarch butterfly is what showed scientists that after 3 generations, trauma could be passed down. It would be inherited after 3 generations. And that is very startling, to say the least. It's startling because, how many generations removed are we? Probably quite a few. But, people who have generational demons, people who have familiar spirits, or just things that they feel cursed, perhaps it's a little bit of both. I mean, maybe we're talking about the same thing, maybe we're not. But yeah, trauma etching itself into your genes after 3 generations, and familiar spirits have to be connected, don't they? I mean, I don't see how those 2 topics wouldn't be connected. So let's see. He says he tried to commit suicide when he was 11, but then it stopped. For once, his mother took him and his father to a child guidance clinic. He says, my father was terrified. Somewhere he knew where my despair came from. I started therapy with a sweet older woman who sat behind her desk and talked to me. And once in a while, I talked back. We had met for at least a year. I never told her about my father's treatment of me. I wouldn't have known if it was relevant or what to say about it. I get that. I mean, it's like certain things, like, how do you bring this up? I get it. Absolutely. And although I have felt suicidal many times since then, I have never tried to kill myself. The lady must have been doing something right. I liked her, although I had no idea why, and my father never touched me again. Terry went on, he mused. It never occurred to me I was being abused, not until my 30s, when the therapist I was seeing at the time stopped me as I described what happened and told me I had been sexually abused. I was shocked, but it made sense because I hate him so much. Yeah, these things are very, just very these are very complicated issues in humans. You would not think that's the case. I'm not saying it's not the case. I'm saying the average person who's not went through that, they would not immediately think that it would take that long for it to be noticed. But in fact, yes, it does, and very frequently. People discover retroactively that they were being abused in the past. And so that's why it's so hard to approach these topics, because sometimes people have it in the back of their mind. It hasn't come out all the way into their conscious mind, or sometimes they're still sensitive to it. And so you'll say something that will immediately trigger that trauma back. And I've seen that before in people that I personally talked to. I've known a number of people who have been through sexual trauma, and talked to them about it. And days or weeks or sometimes even months later, it will come up on my end. I will bring it up in a conversation. I will say, yeah, I mean, blah, 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 that was something that you had to do, just in passing. And it will remind them. They had completely forgotten or blocked it out of their memory. And it shocked me the first time it happened. Yeah, I mean, like, you could definitely see, oh crap, that actually happened to me. Absolutely. People who have been through traumatic situations, they will completely wipe it from their memory. And it's not just sexual trauma either. It can be a physical, like physical abuse. It can be mental abuse. Um, for instance, I'll even open up and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. The lowest point in my life when I was still using drugs, I had really been at a low point in my life, and just I was acting very carelessly, and I was really, really not taking care of myself, and was really high on very powerful drugs. And those parts of my life are very spotty in my mind. Like a lot of it, I blacked out because one, I don't like the person that I was. It was a person that I look back at, and it kind of um, it disgusts me, but more in a sad type of way. Like I'm more disappointed and disgusted in myself. But the interactions I had with people around me, any number of reasons. But the point is, some of that is spotty. Like I can't remember a full timeline of the things that happened. I remember specific things for sure, but not other things. And it's like it kind of throws my perception of like I couldn't tell you what I was doing for those years. Like if you asked me what was I doing in the summer of that year, I couldn't tell you. I don't know what I was doing exactly. Terry continues on about his hatred in the present tense, even though his father had been dead for years. He said, I imagined living a life so isolated that I had no way of knowing that not all boys are brutally violated at age 6, 4, 3, and 2. It was unbearable to me, and I stepped back from my own disgust, instead concentrating on my fury at the vile man who was Terry's father. He's looking at him as an individual, separate from him. That's another kind of dissociation. One effect of my counter dissociation was that I dismissed his father's humanity, just as Terry did. To the extent that I counter dissociated, it was less painful to me than considering the interplay between father and son as understandable in any way from a human perspective. When I was angry with his father, I thought he was a psychopath. When I had perspective, I wonder if he had a dissociative identity disorder. Like I said, I had mentioned that it's very possible. No, absolutely, Claire. That's exactly. Uh, you know, when again, I have not been through any of the extreme like abuse of this sense, and I'm obviously thankful for that. But I definitely believe the people who have been, and I can tell basically by the way they talk about it, that they're obviously telling the truth. But when I am talking about dissociation, exactly what you said, drug abuse is mostly the need for escapism. That's what I have come to realize is what I was doing. That use of drugs is definitely an attempt at escaping or dissociating the pain. Now, drug abuse is you're doing it to yourself. It is not like a biological dissociation response, but that same idea of just not, being pacified, not having to think about the things going on. Absolutely, and it forms this loop where you feel bad for being somebody who does drugs, and so then to numb that pain, you go and you get more drugs to numb the pain, and so it's a loop, and that loop just continues on and on and on. And so, what is insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Or was I expecting different results? Not exactly. I was just not wanting to think about results. So, let's see. Terry had ways of getting revenge beyond not crying when beaten. A series of events occurred in which Terry defeated his father's efforts to relate to him. For example, on Terry's wedding day, his father said to him, "So I guess everything turned out all right after all." "Yeah, sure." As if they had ever had a conversation in which they talked through the turbulent events of Terry's childhood. Terry turned to him and he said, "I said nothing. I knew how to stare him down by then. He shriveled before my eyes." Terry's revenge culminated in the period before his father's death.
I knew he had cancer and he was terrified. He denied he was sick, refused to go to a doctor, just got weaker and more frightened until near the end. And he'd call me and ask me to come see him, told me how proud he was of me, said he knew I'd get things in order and make sure his health improved. But as far as I was concerned, he was evil, with no redeeming qualities. So it had never even occurred to me to fly out there to see him or to make sure he went to a doctor or later to arrange for a second opinion and accompany him to it. I was implicable. I refused to see him. I never said that. I just never went. And in the end, my sister called and said I'd better come soon if I was going to come. And later, my father called and said he was looking forward to seeing me tomorrow. I could have already been there. I certainly knew how grave things were. But I said I'd see him tomorrow, knowing I wouldn't go till the day after that, when I was pretty sure he would be dead, and so he died before I got there. Yeah, I mean, was this right or was it wrong? I don't honestly know. It's like, am I to be the judge of whether that was right or wrong? Do I understand why he did it? Yeah, absolutely. I understand why he did that. I mean, these things are so complex, and these people who have turned it into a science to do this to people, to manufacture, soldiers, black ops super soldiers, and mental slaves. This is what they're doing to the people in Hollywood. And obviously not every single one of them, but come on now, these child stars are being groomed by these pervert producers. The story of what happened to the Nickelodeon star Drake Bell, that guy who abused him and was found guilty of it, still works at a children's television network. So what the hell is going on in Hollywood? Well, they're doing this because they know that you can take somebody who's got a lot of talent and you can enslave them so that uh, they're signed to your record label. Well, now they're never going to own their own music, and you're going to ensure that they never muster up the courage to own their own music because you're going to pay somebody to keep them in check. Either that person will go and befriend them and act like their best friend. In the case of Kanye West, they were a trainer or whatever. These people are installed around the individual and they know how to manage them. Just like an abusive spouse or a significant other knows how to press your buttons to get you to do certain things. Same idea. Terry's tone was truthful and angry and almost inhuman. He said, I felt a heaviness in my stomach as I considered Terry's relentless hatred. How could I reconcile his heartlessness with the wounded child slash fan that by now I had known for years? In order to maintain my analytic bond, I had to counter dissociate at least some of my patient's cold-bloodedness. So he had to, it's interesting because I'm literally doing exactly what the therapist is doing in this case. Yeah, I mean, am I to be the judge of what he did? Am I to be the one that says it's right or wrong? I can't make that decision, but I totally understand. And that's what he's saying here. He's saying, in order to maintain my analytic bond to help the patient, he had to, kind of counter dissociate or just say, yeah, I'm not going to make a decision on that. The violence in Terry's soul was encapsulated in fantasies he withheld from me for several years. Fantasies that became almost overwhelming when he saw men on the street or in public restrooms, especially if they were wearing shorts or otherwise showing skin. I see a man's knees when he is wearing shorts. I see his feet in open sandals or his torso if the shirt is unbuttoned, or, God forbid, he is bare-chested. To me, he is naked, revolting, and dangerous. In a nanosecond, I have raged him in my mind, cut him up, and eaten his flesh. So, interesting here. I mean, back to, was the father perhaps abused himself? Well, from this generational familiar curse, it gives this feeling of hatred, and yeah, now the hatred is connected to that the pathological behavior, I guess you would say, and so now it's it's turned him into someone who has these fantasies, and it's very deeply rooted. And like you said, Claire, earlier, it absolutely is a generational spirit. Absolutely. So he says, the therapist is in the italics. Inwardly, I gasped from the horror I felt as I first heard these fantasies of rape and cannibalization. Did I have another Jeffrey Dahmer in my office? Did I need to worry about him acting on these bizarre, frightening impulses? Would I have to notify authorities about him and ruin the trust we had finally begun to establish? Upon my inquiring, though, it became clearer that he had never come close to acting on his urges, nor in my judgment did it seem likely that he would do so in the future. Comforting myself with this assessment and my knowledge that Terry's sadism had always stayed fully contained in his fantasy life, I protectively counter-dissociated the intensity of his nearly hallucinogenic visions, neither forgetting them nor letting them overwhelm me, as they had in those moments after he first described them. He says, I have recounted in the study the extent of Terry's paternal sexual abuse and the long transferential struggle we have engaged in over the course of his analysis as he furiously attacked me, perceiving me as a likely abuser. Yet eventually he said he loved me and brought me Father's Day cards each year thereafter. That's interesting. So I guess I don't know. I wonder if I'm reading that correct. I don't know if he's saying that happened to him after, like, between him and the doctor, or what. Maybe he said, after 10 years of psychoanalysis, Terry looked back on his lifelong hatred of his evil father and reluctantly recognized that his father, too, had an enormously difficult childhood. He acknowledged something that he had always known and yet not synthesized into his view of his father. His father had been horrifically abused sexually, physically, and emotionally. His father had been horrifically abused sexually, physically, and emotionally by his own father and 3 older half-brothers, and then went on to abuse his own full younger brother. By recognizing his father's childhood traumas, Terry humanized his father, something that all his life he had been loath to do. He took a more nuanced view of his father, although he could not forgive him, conscious that his father's history did not earn him a pass on having abused Terry so appallingly. That Terry no longer saw him simply as a malicious, inhumane, evil monster. And as Terry allowed his father's humanity into the room, so did I. We each let go of our respective dissociation and counter-dissociation, and it became possible to reconsider who his father was. A man who, like Terry, had been viciously abused, but who, unlike Terry, had revisited this evil upon his son. So he's saying that through dealing with the trauma, that's the difference. Probably, yeah. When Terry talked again about how he had dealt with his father's death, he was subdued, sad, and almost defeated. He was as hungry for affection as I was. He did terrible things, but he just wanted to be loved. He wanted his son to be a good father to him. He wanted an athletic, all-American son to teach him how to be a man. I wasn't that son, and he never let me forget it, even when he was ravenous for me. I sleepwalked through most of my childhood. It made it difficult for me to benefit from anything in my life. What my father thought of me was paramount, as if him thinking better of me would have made a difference by then. So sad, so sad. Absolutely, it is a very sad story. Returning to thoughts of how he behaved as his father was dying, Terry wondered, if I could talk to my younger self, what could I say? You'll feel better in 20 years from now if you treat him better now. Like he's like a hypothetical. Or should I say, you'll feel more like a human being if you treat him like one. In my work with Terry, my counter-dissociation, or intuitively helped protect our therapeutic relationship. For example, I never for a moment forgot Terry's furious attacks on me, which devoured much of our time and energy in the early stages of treatment. Yet, to maintain a safe space in my office for both of us, I needed to dissociate his attempts to keep me at bay so I could find the frightened boy Terry remained in late middle age. Likewise, my counter-dissociation allowed me to continue to strengthen my bond with Terry rather than let it get fractured by the cannibalistic fantasies that so alarmed me when he first told me about them. Once I concluded that Terry was in no danger of acting on his impulses, I was able to put them away in a corner of my mind and not let them distract me from the desperate needs this man brought to this analysis. And when our relationship deepened and strengthened, I was able to allow these cannibalistic fantasies back into my consciousness, knowing that, although they signified an important aspect of Terry, they certainly did not represent who he was as a man. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot here. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it off there because I think that was a good place to wrap it up. Let's see. We're right here at the I don't know what the time was. I think an hour and 17 minutes is where we're at. Okay. Yeah, guys. So very complex origin and way that evil manifests. And that's kind of what ponerology is. And it is the evil of evil, the study of evil. And it is a very deep subject because studying evil, I guess if we're to take something from what we learned, what you're going to deal with and struggle with is being around all of the evil ideas or dealing with them. You run the risk of it blackpilling you or counter dissociating you or numbing you in the process. And so, what is evil? Is it a force of nature, or is it like a polar opposite? Whereas God has all infinite, generative, creative power, the opposite is that Satan exists out of a void of that power. Whereas God has unlimited creative potential, Satan literally has none, and so he has to steal it as a parasite. He has to parasite off of it and gain power through influence. Claire says the dark force is running rampant on the earth now. Absolutely. We're definitely noticing that, and I think it's really being used for something. I do, because, well, around the end of last year, December 24th, they do this ritual in the Vatican, and the Vatican is doing a lot of stuff underground, a lot of satanic rituals, and obviously abusing children. So they do this, what they call in all these newspaper articles, they're using the same terminology, a ritual that's never been done before, the sacred portals. And so they do this giant ritual, and they form the sigil of Lucifer on the map, with all these doors that they were opening. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. I've got the picture here. Yeah, here it is. So all of these doors, the 5 doors that they open, form this sigil of Lucifer. And so after all of the Biden years, now we've got Trump that's coming in, and it just seems like they've opened the floodgates. It just seems like, it's time for all-out chaos, and that's what Albert Pike said was going to happen. It was going to be all-out chaos in order to cause people to basically fall on their knees and just submit to the force of government or whatever it takes to put this down. But yeah, I'm inclined to believe that the chaos is just being allowed to run loose because something's feeding off of it. As a matter of fact, I highly encourage you guys to check out this article, because I make a connection between this book, Ringmakers of Saturn, Norman Bergrand, who was a scientist who had compiled a lot of data, and he observed around the rings of Saturn what he called luminous sources. And fast forward to 2024, at the end of the year, these plasmoids start showing up, these orbs. And so I made it a point. I was like, I'm not going to take these things seriously until I can actually talk to somebody personally who has seen them. And sure enough, I did. A friend of mine saw these and reported to me that they just vanish into thin air. They'll be there 1 minute and then they'll just snap
vanish into thin air. And lo and behold, there are research papers on this. UAPs, extraterrestrial life, plasmoid, shapeshifters, replicons, thunderstorms, lightning, hallucinations, aircraft disasters. Aircraft disasters. You remember how the beginning of this year there was a bunch of aircraft disasters, and they tried to tell us it was because of DEI hiring? Yeah, I didn't buy that personally. I didn't. But seems like it's not happening right now. We haven't had any of those in a while, so knock on wood. But these plasmoids can cause hallucinations and aircraft disasters. And I imagine if these were interfering with pilots, I don't believe the government would tell us that, because then it would scare the hell out of people. Yeah, so they could cause hallucinations. They're active in thunderstorms and, up in the clouds where the pilots are. So, here we go. Plasmoids appear to purposefully interact and engage in complex behaviors, and it is suggested they are sentient and represent a fourth domain of life. Here's a research paper. Plasma, so fourth domain of life. RNA, DNA, consciousness. Statistical analysis of unidentified anomalous phenomena in the thermosphere. Yeah, I mean, this is real deal. Extraterrestrial life in the thermosphere. Plasmas, UAP, pre-life, fourth states of matter. Here's another one. Yeah, and so I made the connection between these plasmoids and Norman Berggren's research. I am inclined to believe that what he called luminous sources are in fact plasmoids or plasmas. So I brought the book in side by side, and I was interested to see could these be plasmas, what he's talking about. Oh yeah, Claire, the interstellar thing coming to Earth. I don't know. I mean, that's why I said the whole idea with these plasmoids, I was not going to take them seriously until I could talk to somebody personally who would actually be able to witness them with their own eyes. So it's like, if we witness something, or if something happens, okay, well then maybe I'll be scared of it. But it's like until then, I just don't know, because there's been so many nothings, false flags, and or not false flags, fake news and psyops and stuff like that. There have been a lot of false flags too, and maybe they will use them for false flags. I don't know. I have no clue what that is, or if that's just preparing people for this idea of extraterrestrial life, or I don't know. Let's see. I will. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and play the video for you. That was part of the article. It's only a few minutes. Let's see. If it'll load. Worst when I need it. Wants to freeze up on me. That's how it usually goes. Hold up. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. And
well, first of all, Saturn is inhabited. Somebody's there.
But the surface is not solid, and it's gas.
First of all, no, you don't know that. You've been told that.
yeah, I don't know. I have no clue, but I'm inclined to believe these things may not be what we're being told they are. They might be sentient, but Satan and the fallen angels came as plasma lightning too. This is from Berggren's book. Yeah, he had a lot of high-level research in that book. It's very complex book. And then the Schumann resonance on November 17th goes off the charts. It's never been like that before. And sure enough, the first sighting of these things right around then they are using this sacred portal and a ritual that's never been done before. In all these different news outlets, they're using the same terminology. And this all goes down around the same, month or 2 month interval. The final door that they opened was at none other than a prison too, so accompanied that by all the sacrifices and ritual abuse going on. In my opinion, what they're doing is they're ramping up the chaos to potentially allow these entities to thrive off of it. And I think the internet is very much connected to that as well. They use the internet to get people angry, and that anger is what the system feeds on, that breath. But what's feeding on it? Well, maybe these things. Yeah, all these doors form, and people tell me that it's a coincidence. You can't argue to me that that's a coincidence. Look at that. Tell me that's a coincidence right there. Seriously, people come and they tell me, no, that's just a coincidence. That there's nothing to see here. There's no reason that we're opening a new portal and a ritual. It's not a door, it's not a mass, it's a ritual and it's a portal. Come on. Not true. Yeah, and it has this Kabbalistic meaning, of course. It is very, it doesn't necessarily mean Satan. That's not what I'm saying. This whole idea of the sigil of Lucifer is actually connected to light going into the eyes. And I think that is where this concept of plasmas come in. So, Washington, D.C., and I remember this because I was actually on a stream with you guys on New Year's. Soon as the clock strikes midnight, this giant flash of lightning hits the Capitol in Washington. Remember, there was also a giant flash of lightning that hit the Vatican a few years back. It's important because every obelisk is connected to a dome. The obelisk obviously is the phallus, and the dome is the womb. And so, only a month later, they move Trump's inauguration into the Capitol dome. Why? Why did they move it into the Capitol dome? I don't personally buy that it was for weather. I think that was a symbolic choice. Now, I may be wrong entirely. It's possible I may be wrong. But the dome inside the Capitol, as a matter of fact, has 72 angels in it. And it's a pagan painting. It has 72 angels in it. And that is significant because if you go back and you look at the story of Isis and Osiris, the Osirian legend in ancient Egypt, Osiris is murdered by his brother Typhon in the month of the Scorpion. That's why Judas is identified as the Scorpion, Scorpio. He betrays Jesus with a kiss, the kiss of the Scorpio. And so I think it was the 27th of the month, the Egyptian month of Athir, with 72 co-conspirators. So why are there 72 angels also in this it's called apotheosis of Washington. So to become a god, apotheosis, and the murals of George Washington ascending to heaven to become a god. And so why do we have 72 angels here, and the Osirian legend is a death and rebirth ritual? It is the idea of becoming a god. That is what the story is. Okay, and so the idea is that you have to die and be reborn to become a god, and that's what the Book of the Dead is about. You have the Book of the Dead, but the actual translation is more close to the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Light. I think it's Day.
the book of coming forth by day. And so what that means, at least the way I read it, what that means is it's not talking about death as in, you're dead, not breathing anymore. What I think it's talking about is the death and rebirth on a spiritual level. I think what it's talking about is this is how you take a mortal man and turn him into a god. I think that's what it means to come forth by light. And so when one is baptized, in Christianity, by the blood of Jesus, you're brought forth by light or by day. You're brought into the light after your baptism. It's because you enter a higher state when you have been baptized, and you are now saved in the sense of the word, washed clean of your sins. And so I think that's what it's talking about. And I think that is actually what's going on with Trump's inauguration being moved inside. I think that they are going to do the same thing they did to Washington with him. I think they're going to try and make him a sun king. And I've heard from a number of different sources. Apparently this final sun king is going to, Satan is going to be the sun king Apollo, or he will return as Apollo. And so what does Trump have in his penthouse? Well, he's got this massive gold mural of Apollo. And, the Sun King loves gold, and so his whole penthouse is gold. And yeah, what Trump and pagan gods? Well, yeah, obviously he is the Sun King. He is the best, and he is the greatest. If you have been raised being told you are the Messiah and the Sun King and God, well, then it makes a lot more sense to me why you go out and you tell people you're the best, you're the greatest, and nobody could do it. Like, it's because you've been raised thinking you are God. And that's what they've told him. That's why, in my opinion, they created him with a specific gematria that would be significant to the Jews. A lot of people have noticed this. I mean, people who don't take it seriously, whatever. You don't gotta take it seriously. I'm not telling you to believe in gematria, but I'm telling you to believe that people believe in gematria and hold it very to high regards, and that some people who do believe in it act on their beliefs. So it doesn't matter if it's crazy. It matters that people believe it and they conduct themselves according to it. And so if they think, because the numbers told them so, that he is the one that will rebuild the temple, then that's what it's going to be. And you can't tell me they've never put a United States anybody on an Israeli coin. They ain't never compared a United States politician to King Cyrus. No, they've never named a town in Israel after anybody from the United States. So you telling me people think he's Christian? I have showed people the video of him saying, I'm not Christian, and those same people, right after they heard it, they have sat there and tried to tell me that no, he didn't mean that. That's not what he meant. No, he meant something else. Okay, whatever. But yeah, Claire, you said why are most of our state capitals domes? Because it goes back all the way back to Isis and Osiris. The womb of Isis is the dome, and it is almost always across from an obelisk. Usually there's water in between. But the obelisk obviously is the phallus, and the dome is the womb. And so the idea is, obviously you need to bring the two together. And so all of these city-states, you got the Vatican has an obelisk and a dome. You've got the city of London, it's got an obelisk and a dome. You've got the United States, Washington, D.C., it's got the obelisk and the dome. Yeah, I as far as I'm concerned, it is this idea that I guess it is a symbol of an empire. I guess that's how I would read it. You're saying you've got both parts. You're building this monument, and you're saying we have united both of the energies, and so we have got
an empire here. Again, it goes back to Rome, it goes back to Babylon. All of these things are connected. I'm going to do a Google search. Let's see. Obelisk and dome. Let's see. Oh no, shoot. I don't want that. Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. As a matter of fact, the idea of ley lines are very important. I'm not quite sure what exactly they do, but the whole idea of the what Carner calls the ritual machine, it is very much laid out according to ley lines. It is a machine, absolutely. Yeah. So you've got Washington D.C. You've got St. Paul's Cathedral, which is in the city of London in England. Uh, Yeah, another thing that's interesting is that if you go in to Italy, there's actually the Jesuit Mother Church, the Church of the Jesu, and then right across the street in the same palace is just the Scottish Rite Freemason World Headquarters. And you go into the city of London, and you've got the Crown Temple Bar, which is the actual crown. So when they say that something is owned by the crown, they don't necessarily mean the monarch. They mean it's owned by the city of London's Crown Corporation. And so all of these things are located right near these symbols, and they're laid out that way for a reason. They are very much a circuit board. So yeah, and these obelisks are very old. That's another thing people often forget, is that these obelisks are not recreations. They are, as a matter of fact, like very old. The Cleopatra's Needle comes from Heliopolis, or On. It was the city called On, which means sun. And then I know the Vatican obelisk was. I'm trying to think. I think it was at one of the circuses or something. The Vatican obelisk was. But yeah, man. There's obelisks all over. I bet if you guys looked, you guys could find obelisks near you that are just in parks or stuff like that. You know, now that you know what to look for, just be on the lookout and you'll see them all over. But alrighty, well, guys, I appreciate your time. I appreciate y'all hanging out with me tonight. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me ramble and go on. As long as you learn something new in everything that you do, nothing could be a worthless experience. And make sure you always remember that, guys. That's something to live your life according to. As long as you learn one new thing in every experience that you have, nothing can technically be worthless. So I will leave you guys with that tonight. To everybody, I appreciated you guys tuning in. Pastor Carner will be back tomorrow, and you guys will see me again. I highly encourage you guys to check out my Substack, and then if you guys are interested in that full interview that we did, you can. That's an article on my Substack, and you can follow Harrison's Substack, ponerology.substack.com. And yeah, a lot of cemeteries have obelisks. Anytime you see those, I assume that it was usually a Freemason or somebody who is aware of it that built that. So, you know, the Freemason may have that as his grave marker. But guys, I appreciate it. I wish everybody a good rest of their week, a good night, and take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.